Free Range Texan podcast.
Real worldwide transmission with a real Free Range Texan. Campfire.
The Free Range Texan podcast. Free.
With your host, Michael Shawn.
Free Range Texan, episode 41. What an episode we've got lined up for you here. Thank you, Michael Stover, for helping us get lined up with the lovely and talented Ashley Puckett. We get to visit with her on our Free Range Texan talent file. And we're going to get to hear her hot new song, Bulletproof. You know, I was thinking the other day that while the spotlight tends to shine on me all the time, there is actually this remarkable group of persons who, without their teamwork, I don't even know if Free Range Texan would even exist. In the beginning, helping us find our way with the Campfire was Anthony Garza and Melissa Redden. Our chief engineer is a guy by the name of John Sanders from Snyder, Texas. He has single-handedly turned Studio A into one of the premier audio production facilities in the podcast world. John's wife, Amy Carmen, is the West Texas girl next door voice of Sweetie Pie. Shh, don't tell anybody that. That's the first time it's been mentioned. We don't do a show without her. Then, of course, there's Roger Dykes, our absolute favorite podcast critic and tireless contributor to Michael Shawn's Campfire. Kid Manning, our resident musicologist, helping to make our talent file stronger and stronger. Next comes Deep Creek Sound and Video Technologies, providing vital audio and post-editing support in our production process. And of course, the lineup of as many as 50 phenomenal guests so far on our podcast, blog, and YouTube channel. And finally, the headwaters of the whole network, Kathy Deerdorf and the folks at 18PR, where the PR stands for Public Relations. 18PR is where the Free Range Texan podcast was conceived and has been continually produced. In other words, folks, they sign the checks. What an outfit. What a group. Oh, yes. And of course, don't forget our Chief of Security, Foxy the Wonder Dog. I'm certain there will be more on that in shows to come. So I reckon we ought to get episode 41 rolled out. So let's all saddle up and get ready to ride. Have digital microphone will travel.
Blankets, ho! Get 'em up! Move 'em out!
You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast. Hang on a second. I didn't have the cord plugged into the phone. Hang on. Boy, it's fixing to be big. It's fixing to be wall to wall, big boy. Hello, check. 1, 2, 3. Hello, check.
Oh, I can hear you much better now.
Well, it's because my engineer is special.
You hear you much better now. You sound like yourself. Ask me anything. My life's an open pamphlet.
I don't know if this is a good idea or not. Yeah,
I'm calling you with a news story.
Okay. I'll probably have room for it somewhere.
No, well, it's going to be me telling you I was reading something in the local paper.
All right. Well, I'm thinking we can use our break-in Free Range Texan news work intro and outro on it.
No, it's not that.
Yes, we are.
It's going to be one of them phone calls. It's going to be one of them phone calls.
I can do whatever I want to do. Okay.
Do the right thing. Do the right thing.
Yeah, okay, I'll try. All right, stand by. We interrupt this podcast for a special report from the Free Range Texan News Network. Free Range Texan News Network News Desk.
This is John Sanders.
John, man, it is good to hear from you. You are probably one of our major voices of authority on our podcast, John. What do you got on your mind?
You know, I was listening to the podcast. Great job, by the way. I love this podcast.
What did you say?
You know, I was listening to the podcast. Great job, by the way. I love this podcast.
I couldn't quite hear you.
Podcast. Great job, by the way. I love this podcast. And I was perusing the local newspaper, and I saw a story. I just needed to call you and tell you about it because I want to get your take on it. What do you think of smart cars?
Well, they're pretty smart if they're driving themselves these days. I've not been anxious to jump in one myself, but what's your point?
No. The smart cars, you know, those cars that you put on like a pair of pants, you know, they're little tiny things.
We don't have a lot of those in West Texas, John.
Well, apparently we had one here. I was reading the paper, and there was one of those little smart cars, and it was going 90 for nothing in the neighborhood, and it ran into a pedestrian.
Oh, my. Oh,
yes.
my.
Yes.
Well, I hope everyone's all right.
Well, yes, it turns out there's some good news out of it. The pedestrian was able to get to the driver to the hospital in time, and he's in serious condition, but he'll be okay.
The pedestrian was able to get the driver to the hospital in time. Is that what you just said?
Yes. Perhaps smart cars are safe for whatever they run into.
Hey, John.
You blew the whole thing.
Well, I know, because you blew it first, and I had to repeat the line that I knew you had blown to try to get you to make it better.
I got my line exactly right. The pedestrian, the whole thing is it's a smart car, those little bitty tiny things. And so it ran into a pedestrian.
Well, you lost me at putting them on like pants.
The pedestrian got the driver to the hospital in time to save his life. You've never seen a smart car, have you? You've never seen a smart car, have
My
you?
kingdom for a roving reporter. You've been listening to an FRTNN special report. Time now for another segment of the Free Range Talent File. Brought to you by A-Team PR, bringing a host of creative media production and public relations services to our exclusive list of clients. Maybe you could hire the A-Team. And now, here's the next segment of the Free Range Talent File. On this edition of the Free Range Talent File, we've got Ashley Puckett. She had the first single, Medicine, having been released in August of 2019. The single charted nationally on the Indie World Country Record Report and Airplay Today country charts. But she's got a brand new single, Bulletproof, that we're going to be playing coming up here in a few minutes on the podcast. But for right now, let's welcome Ashley Puckett.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are, in fact, interviewing someone now that is from up near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But you're not a city girl. You grew up in the country. Isn't that correct?
That is, yes. I loved the city for, a good while, maybe a day or an afternoon or something. But, I've always been more of a country girl. That's everything from music to lifestyle So absolutely right.
We want to remind our listeners that we have our blog article at freerangetexan.net that is up now about Ashley. There are a number of pictures there. That's at freerangetexan.net. Ashley, I understand that at the age of 16, you picked up a guitar and began writing songs and actually hit the road as a country singer. Did you do that at 16?
So yes, I've been singing basically all my life, I think since probably 5 or 6 years old, writing songs very young as well. So when for my birthday, I received my first guitar, started taking lessons for my 16th, and it was really nice because it was aiding me into becoming a better songwriter at the point. So that's kind of when things started getting a little bit more serious than I kind of saw them already becoming. And from there, I started, doing a lot more shows around the neighborhood, church festivals, really anything I could get my hands on just to kind of start, testing the waters.
Certainly, there must have been people that you listened to and watched perform and thought, wow, that's what I want to do.
So there's lots of them, believe it or not. I know growing up when I was 5 or 6, I always wanted to be in the group, the Dixie Chicks. So they were, the first song I ever sang was from them. It was called You Are Mine. Still to this day, I'll cover that song when I sing. And, throughout the years as I was growing up and performing and really becoming myself, making my own sound and becoming the artist that I am today, I've been shaped by a lot of artists such as Leanne Rimes, Patsy Cline, Carole King, Miranda Lambert. I love Jody Messina. So it was kind of who I am. Not really so much the pop country, even though I love to listen to it. You'll notice with me it's a lot more romantic and traditional.
The thing we noticed about your music was that you have some pretty strong producers that you have teamed up with and background vocalists and your studio musicians and this sort of thing. Man, it sounds great. How'd you get tied in with all that?
Honestly, I've never said I was ever a lucky person, but there had to be some kind of luck or fate involved with this one. It was actually a mutual friend that had introduced me to my producer, Brian Cole, and Doug Casper at the studio, who's my studio engineer. Through them, I was able to get in touch with the musicians, all of the local ones, even those from Nashville. So I had just really thanks to those two guys.
Ashley, it says in your bio that you believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe that too, by the way. How does that apply, though, to someone who is a singer, songwriter, entertainer, recording artist coming up through the business? Do you still believe that everything that happens is for a reason?
So I still do. I've lived by that for a very long time. It's hard to live by that sometimes. But one thing I've realized is, I've always believed we were put here for a specific reason. And we might have to go through a lot of good times and bad times to get there. And, as an up-and-coming artist and getting to do the things that I've already done this far in my life, and, I still have so much time left. I'm just starting in the career. It kind of makes you think, had this opportunity arose 2 years ago, when I had met Brian and Doug, had that happened years ago, I don't think I would have been in the position to be able to move forward. So I think the timing of everything just seemed to fall into place, and the right people, the right time. So I 100% still believe it.
Now, the album that you're talking about is that Never Say Never album.
Yes, that's the one, Never Say Never.
The tune that we're going to feature on the Free Range Texan this time around is Bulletproof.
Bulletproof was one of the first more upbeat songs that I had chosen. I wanted to make sure there was something meaningful and something that I can enjoy. And, you want to sing that song day one and sing it day 531 the same way. And I love this song because it's very fun to perform, fun to sing, and it showed a lot of my attitude. Where a lot of the other songs on the album, you can see the sweet romantic side of me, but this one pulls out a lot more of that carefree, loose, let's just have fun kind of girl.
So don't look for the sweet romantic side of you in Bulletproof. We so much appreciate you being on our podcast. When you produced Bulletproof, did you know at the time you were producing something as powerful as this song became?
Honestly, no. I knew everything that we did just the way we all worked together in the studio. I knew by the time the project was finished, we were going to have something amazing. But really, until you see that finished product and hear it, you really don't know exactly what you're in for. It's shaped so differently as the recording process goes on, and I didn't actually even know it was going to turn into one of my singles, which was pretty cool too.
To a young person that is listening to this, that thinks that they want to be a singer, songwriter, recording artist, what would be your advice to them?
My advice would be, it's not crazy, even though you might hear that. You know, we're all here for a specific reason, like I said, and if that's something that you're passionate about, you should always follow your passion. And it's going to take a lot of hard work and effort, but if you love it that much, keep going for it.
Great advice, Ashley Puckett. And for our listeners, this special treat. Here from Ashley Puckett's album, Never Say Never, is her latest release, Bulletproof, on the Free Range Texan podcast.
Twisted metal, broken glass, but you always seem to walk away without a scratch. Madness and mayhem roll like water off your back. You're the only one who ain't bleeding after the crash. That's what you want the world to see. But with me, you ain't gotta be bulletproof. Wanna get to you, got a finger on the trigger, just let me through. Give me something real, not a man of steel. I'm not kryptonite. Open up your armored heart, let me in. I wanna get onto your skin. You ain't gotta be bulletproof. You ain't gotta be bulletproof. It's just you and me here, whispering in the dark. All the ghosts are gone. Let down your guard. Oh, tell me your secrets, baby. Show me your scars. Baby, don't you know we all got broken parts? Soft touch can make it alright. So tonight, you ain't gotta be bulletproof. Wanna get to you, got a finger on the trigger, just let me through. Give me something
You've been listening to the Free Range Talent File. If you'd like more information about our guest, just go to our website at freerangetexan.net. Also, submissions to be interviewed on the Free Range Talent File should be sent to our website at freerangetexan.net. Hi, this is Michael Shawn with a heads up for the real country music lovers. Have you heard about Boss Country Radio? When you're not listening to our podcast, you may want to get your country music fix on the latest and greatest global country music network. Heard worldwide on broadcast stations and internet streaming alike. From Hank to Blake to George Strait. Real boss DJs like the old days. And a whole lot of real country you can count on. There's even a rumor that yours truly, old Michael Shawn, has been offered a gig. Maybe y'all ought to check it out. Go to freerangetexan.net and click on the Boss Country Radio banner. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Enjoy. Have digital microphone, will travel. Dress code required. Best if combined with smoked meats. Yeah, like no caps with bills on the back. Yeah, where do you find those anyway? Officially designated as a spectacular use of your time consuming addictive audio. You're listening to the Free Range Texan Podcast. Hi, this is Michael Shawn. And welcome to our Campfire. Bill and Susie became friends at a dance way back in St. Louis, Missouri. Susie didn't have a lot of self-confidence, but she was okay because Bill had enough for both of them. Not long after their relationship, Susie began telling Bill about her past, about one thing that frightened her more than anything else. Earlier, she had met a man in St. Louis who showed interest in her, but she really cared very little for his company. This fellow was a bit of a braggart who liked to drink and show off his girlfriend like a trophy. Upon learning about his characteristics and behaviors, Susie told him that she wasn't interested and suggested that he find someone else. And to her surprise, this just seemed to encourage him all the more. Anyway, by the time Bill met Susie, she had developed a total terror regarding this persistent suitor. Bill wanted to help Susie, but he didn't want to admit that he also was somewhat afraid to meet this individual. Quite often, when Bill would walk her home, he would glance back over his shoulder and say, "I think he's over there, but I'm not afraid." Then she would hold on to Bill's arm as they hurried down the street to the boarding house where she lived. This went on for several months during their courtship. Then one day, Bill said, "I have an idea. Why don't we get married and move away from St. Louis? I can't imagine him following us once he realizes that you're no longer available to be his wife." Susie said, "Oh, Bill, you would do that for me?" "Yes," he replied. "I really don't want you to live out your life in fear as you are now." Well, with that, they made plans to get married and leave St. Louis and all their troubles behind. Bill obtained a wagon, loaded their belongings on it, and headed west into the new frontier. They had every intention of settling down. but they ended up constantly moving from town to town. With each move, Bill felt assured that the man following Susie would just give up and leave them alone. But such was not to be the case. Within a few weeks of moving to the new town, each time the stalker would follow them, reigniting the fear that Susie had in her heart. After several months and a number of moves, Bill and Susie wound up in El Paso, Texas. Bill went to work in a dry goods store while Susie helped out in a dress shop. At last they had found peace, and Susie began to relax. It was about dusk on a Friday night. Susie was walking down the dusty street toward their little house at the edge of town, when sure enough, she saw her stalker. Instead of heading home, she ran into the dry goods store. Terrified, she told Bill that he was back and right behind her. And for the first time, Bill got a glimpse of him. Sure enough, he fit the description Susie had given him. Naturally, he was a bit older than she had described, but that was expected. Now that Bill could identify the man, he would be able to face him and put an end to this long nightmare. The person that seemed to be following Susie was a stranger in town. No one knew him. The next morning, Bill strapped on his gun, hoping to meet the man and discourage his pursuit of Susie. The day went pretty much like other days. Susie went to the dress shop and Bill the dry goods store. Susie continued to harbor the fear that she would be approached by the man once again. The day went by without incident. Bill closed the dry goods store a little early so that he could walk Susie home. As they walked past the saloon, a man stepped out of the shadows. Susie cried out, "That's him!" Bill turned and faced the man who'd been following Susie all these years. Before he could get a word out of his mouth, the man reached for his gun, but Bill's hand was much faster. The bullet went straight through the stranger's heart, and he dropped to the ground. The crowd gathered, and it was soon discovered the stranger was not actually wearing a gun. Thus, Bill had shot an unarmed man. Upon seeing what had taken place, the sheriff escorted Bill to jail, where he was locked up until the circuit judge came to town. Bill explained how the man had harassed his wife for so many years and how he mistakenly thought that he was shooting the man in self-defense. After a short deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of not guilty, and Bill was allowed to return to his beloved wife, Susie. Bill regretted with all of his heart that he had shot an unarmed man, but was comforted by the fact that his wife would no longer be looking over her shoulder. Finally, the nightmare was over. They would both rest peacefully. The next morning, they both got up. Bill went to the dry goods store, Susie to the dress shop, where they remained for the rest of the day. And that evening, Bill closed the store early and went over to the dress shop to have a leisurely walk home with his wife. As they were walking along the street, a man came out of the shadows behind them. Susie turned and cried out, "That's him! That's the man that's been following me!" Shortly thereafter, both Bill and Susie were committed to the sanitarium near El Paso, Texas. I'm Michael Shawn. Thanks for being at our campfire. Adios, my friends. I would just like to state for the record that I'm pretty sure that Bill and Susie were nuts. Oh, man. We have such a good time doing the campfires. Hey, here's a big old podcast hug going out to Ashley Puckett. And thanks big time for spending some time with us here on the Free Range Texan. And speaking of good music, this Boss Radio thing is really a thing. People are now responding from a number of countries all around the world. And of course, right here in Texas as well. And yes, the rumors are true that their people are working with my people. And it's a pretty good chance that I'm going to have my own weekend show offered to me over there on Boss Country. We've already had some emails come in, and the answer is, of course, we will continue with Michael Shawn's Campfire and the Free Range Texan podcast. And as always, it would be of great benefit to Foxy, the Wonder Dog, if a number of our Free Range Texan faithfuls would share our podcast with neighbors, friends, co-workers. This would allow us to continue to increase our numbers, which would allow us to continue to feed Foxy up to 3 times a week. I know what you're thinking, but it's the cost of security, don't you see? I gotta go work on my radio voice. Foxy, get in the pickup. Take 'em home, sweetie pie.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at A-Team PR Studios out yonder in West Texas, with our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael, Shawn, and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now. You hear?
An A-Team PR production. End transmission.